Welcome back into another episode of Rock Boys Football. We are continuing with our individual team previews. Dylan and I have been talking and we just picked teams that we were really interested in. We've watched some film on, we know a decent amount. And we just kind of break them down, give you guys a little analysis and our thoughts and feelings about the team going into the 2021 season. And this episode, we are going to feature the Wisconsin Badgers. It's one of the most consistent teams we've seen in the country through the last 10 years. Paul Chris has done a phenomenal job up there at Camp Randall. And they're set up again for another strong year. Dill is kind of the expert on the Wisconsin Badgers. He's watched the most film out between the two of us. So he's going to be giving us most of the insight on the team. I've watched a few games, so I can also add on. But without further ado, Dill, we're going to kick it over to you. Where do you want to start with this Wisconsin Badgers team?
So just on a high level overview of what I think about the Wisconsin Badgers is that would have been a very, very good team last year if they had kind of Wisconsin quarterback play, which is steady, not make mistakes, allow the running game to lead the way. And that is certainly not what they got last year. I feel like Graham Mertz, with the exception of the first game against Illinois, where he looked very good, looked quite poor for most of the season. And the notable thing is he threw way too many interceptions, and Wisconsin's definitely not a football team that can afford to play that way. So going into this year, I think if they can get maybe Graham Mertz can live up to the talent that he kind of has, or at least was projected to have coming into college from high school, I think you could see a very good Wisconsin team make a big jump this year, because last year was really an uncharacteristically bad Wisconsin, I would say.
Yeah, I think Graham Mertz got a lot of hype after that Illinois game where he threw, I think it was right here, 20 of 21 passes for 250 yards and 5 touchdowns. That was a phenomenal showing by him against a very poor Illinois team. I mean, there was a Graham Mertz for Heisman type vibes to this. And then it didn't. I mean, he played well against a horrible Michigan team. He only threw for 127 yards, but 2 touchdowns, no interceptions. And then it just went downhill, and it went downhill pretty quick. He threw 1 touchdown in the Northwestern game and then didn't throw a single touchdown to close out the regular season. It just seemed like he might have flashed against some bad defenses, but once he started playing some tougher Big Ten defenses in Northwestern, Indiana, and Iowa, and even Minnesota, who's not that good, he just wasn't really performing to the level that we saw early in the season. I know he got COVID. Their season kind of got blown up a little bit, so that was a little choppy for them and not ideal. But he just wasn't consistent enough down the stretch for them.
I don't think it helped him. I think Wisconsin up front was far worse than they generally are, and I don't know that that's going to get better. They are losing their left tackle and left guard, keeping the other side, but I mean, they didn't play well last year. They didn't run the ball like they do, so I don't know. I mean, I think they have uncharacteristic talent on the edge with Danny Davis and Kendrick Pryor, and I think you throw that Jake Ferguson in at tight end. He's a really good tight end. So it's like they have some talent as pass catchers, but Wisconsin's going to need to be able to run the ball a little better, or Graham Mertz is going to have to take a monster step forward in his level of play, which I don't think you can count on this year. I think he'll definitely be better. As Jay said, the season was fairly disrupted for Wisconsin, more so than many other teams. So you have some hope there, but again, it's tough because they have some skill elsewhere. I think Jalen Berger can come in and give them more than what Garrett Groschek gave last year, who was, I think, more or less a glorified fullback in my mind. So we'll see. I think they have the skill to do it. I think although their offensive line didn't play great football last year, that's very uncharacteristic for Wisconsin football. They're generally very stout up front, and that's kind of their bread and butter. So we'll see if they can improve there. If they can, I do think they will have a very good offense. That's kind of my take on that side of the ball.
I think on offense, they they were giving a little too many carries to Groshek. I don't hate him as a player, but like Jalen Berger's your guy, and it shouldn't have been even. Actually, Groshek got 7 more carries on the year than Jalen Berger. I thought that's probably not the move considering Jalen Berger, I think, is a much more talented player than Garrett is. And yeah, I mean, we haven't really seen a Wisconsin team that's thrived past, or not. That's probably bad wording. Their identity has never been pass first. They're always established to run with guys like John Taylor, um, and then work into play action and passing game off the run. This year they didn't run the ball as effectively as they have in the past, and so you want to see them get back to that kind of grounded pound, grind defenses down type of and a strong run game might take a little pressure off Graham Mertz, making them not have to do it all. So, and I think you're right. I like Jake Ferguson a lot. I think he can be an All-American tight end. He's really solid for him. I think that'll be a really good weapon for Graham Mertz.
Yeah, again, I think they do have the talent there. It will be, can they get back to that system they run where they can hammer the ball on teams,
and then you
I like to think they can, because that's what they do. But I don't know. I do think that the pieces are there. I think Graham Mertz has the talent, and he's a fairly good athlete. So I have more hope than I think many people do for this Wisconsin offense, especially coming off of that abysmal year they put together last year. So
yeah. And again, like, I don't want to be too critical of that year last year, because I mean, they took care of business against the bad teams in Illinois and Michigan, but then Northwestern, Indiana, and Iowa are all really, really solid football teams. All three, I think, were top 20 football teams when they played them. So, but they scored 7, 6, and 7 against those teams. So it wasn't really that competitive on the offensive side. Like, they just were really struggling.
I mean, then they only put 20 on Mini, and Mini's one of the worst defense I've ever seen last year. So
yeah,
I just thought the whole year not good enough offense.
Yeah.
Flipping over to the defensive side, though, I actually think they're an extremely good team on that side. Starting at the offense or defensive line spot, I don't love that unit. I think it's kind of a traditional Badger unit. They're not playmakers, but they keep the run under control. They don't get moved around. I think they're going to have big shoes to fill losing Loudermilk, because he was by far their best defensive lineman, I thought, in terms of actually being a little productive and disruptive. Mm-hmm. So they're going to hopefully get somebody to step up there. But otherwise, I think it's a really talented unit.
What my concern is jumping right. I'm just kind of looking over the defensive stats, and I noticed it when I was watching the film, is they just don't get a great pass rush or much sack production out of these defensive linemen. I think their leading guy coming back has 4 sacks. So it's not like that. It's not that disruptive of a unit. They're a solid unit, but they're not disruptive. And I don't think they have a guy to point to where it's like, all right, let's go make a play on 3rd and long, get after the passer. Which I think is always tough to be a successful defense when you don't have that guy. But you're getting into the linebackers, and this is the strength of this defensive unit. Jack Sanborn and Leon Chenal, they were pretty much all over the. I feel like Jack Sanborn's been there for he seems like he's been in there for the last 10 years. Dude's a veteran, probably is the leading returner in Big Ten tackles. I mean, he's been there for a long time. He's produced for a long, long time. And Leo Chenal is a great running mate. Both those guys are going to be super solid for the Badgers in the middle of that defense.
Yeah, and just athletic linebackers. And I think one thing I will add to what they can do is, yes, they can do the traditional linebacker stuff, stop the run and cover pretty well. But I do think those both can get after the quarterback on blitzes. So that's, I mean, watching them last year was generally how they generated the pass rush was through blitzes. Yep. And I think those two outside linebackers, and Bertz and Herbig, are decent pass rushers. Like, there's no, like, let's say TJ Watt from that position that they've relied on in a sense. So they don't have that in either of those two in my mind, but I do think they're a little better than you were giving them credit for in terms of being able to generate a little bit of one-on-one pass rushing. So that, combined with the ability to blitz Chenal and Sanborn, who get home when they come, I think will give them a better shot of keeping some semblance of a pass rush going in this year as they did kind of last year. Granted, you're right, they're defensive line, not pass rushers.
Yeah, and that second, I'm looking at my notes here that Eric Burrell, he's gone for them. I forget what number he was, but I think it was 20-something. 25. He was just flashing. He was all over the field for them. One of their leading tacklers on the season, too. He's going to be a big miss. They obviously lose Rashad Wild-Goose, who's heading playing for the Buffalo Bills next year. So the secondary unit takes a little bit of a hit. But I think there'll be a pretty solid unit coming back as well.
Yeah, I mean, I think that Hicks and Williams are pretty solid, experienced corners, and I didn't think Wisconsin was giving up a whole lot of big plays last year. So, I mean, that's an important thing to do when you play defense the way they do. So, if they can limit the big plays and grind teams down, which they were pretty effective doing, as they were not giving up a whole lot of points, and that's on the heels of a offense that was turning the ball over and not really moving it much. So, I mean, even their solid stats, I think, are amplified by the fact that they were working with an offense that was giving them no help. So, I like what they have on defense. Personally, I actually think it's a very good unit. Obviously, I think that the major strength is the linebackers, as you said. Sanborn and Chenal they're both going to be NFL players for sure. Sanborn will probably be a fairly high pick, I think.
Yeah, I mean, looking back too on that past season, I don't want to, again, we struggle, especially with Big Ten teams who really had their seasons kind of disrupted. I don't want to put too much stock in last season, but I mean, that defense was elite. I mean, they only gave up 7 points to Illinois. They only gave up 11 to Michigan. A lot of that was garbage time. Michigan really didn't move the ball at all that game. Northwestern only scored 17 in a game that Mertz threw 3 interceptions. Indiana only scored 14. Obviously, I don't think Michael Penix played in that game, but that's still very impressive. And Iowa scored 28, which is tough.
But in just a note on how that game went, they only gave up like 6, I believe, in the first half. So you're just seeing they maybe got broken a little bit by the end, because when your offense isn't moving it, I feel like there's just an inherent tendency to see your defense break down. So again, I think even those stats, 28 to Iowa doesn't look great, but I think if you watch the game flow, that I didn't think the Hawkeyes easily were moving the ball on them. So again, I do love this defense. I think it's very rare to see defenses in this day and age holding teams to consistently below 20 points. So
yeah. And I mean, realistically, if Wisconsin's going to be a top 10 team, top 15 team, like those fans up there expect from year to year, they got to get back to what makes them good, what makes them Wisconsin. And that's run the ball, eat clock, control the ball, and the time on the clock. So that's kind of how Wisconsin's won games and had success. And they need to kind of get back to that.
Yeah, no, for sure. Because they're going to have good defense. I mean, Jim Leonard is a super dependable coach. I think he just surprised he's kind of not moved up or gotten a head coaching job, or at least looks. But
it's too short.
The fact that he's still there is super beneficial to them. And I love what he does. I love what Paul Chris does personally. I think he's an underrated coach. It's not, to me, Wisconsin's an easy place to win exactly, because it is hard to bring maybe the top end recruits, but they do what they do, very similar to what Mike D'Antonio did for years at Michigan State. So, I mean, hats off to that program. I think they're going to have a bounce back, because that defense is extraordinarily good in my view. So that's kind of my thoughts going in. I don't think you'll see a team that's kind of at the level they were last year.
It's always
they
tough
should win that division.
Thinking about Wisconsin, like as a team in the top 15, top 10, because the talent is there. It's not always there, I should say. But they win by playing their brand of football, which I think can get you to a certain point. I just don't know if it's going to get you catapult into the top 5. I love Wisconsin's game. I'm a sucker for some of that old school smash mouth game, kind of like the Iowa Hawkeyes play. And so I always root for them. unless they're playing Michigan. But yeah, I look forward to seeing a kind of a bounce back year from the Badgers. Before we close out the show, I want to take a look at their schedule because it's relatively tough because they play Penn State and Michigan across the conference, and they start with Penn State, which is going to be one of the games you got to have circled on that opening week 1, September 4th slate. Obviously Georgia Clemson that week 2, but that's going to be a real telltale. I believe they've opened up. Do you have the odds up there or no? I can pull them up. I believe.
Well, I agree. I think Penn State is coming to town again, another Big Ten team that's traditionally very solid of the Michigan, Wisconsin, Penn State kind of seasons, like 3 teams that you generally expect more of. And all I'd say were quite disappointing. So again, we're going to see all these teams coming back with a normal year, hopefully. And I don't see those again. I do see Penn State as being a tough challenge for Wisconsin.
Yeah, they're 4.5-point favorites. Obviously, that game is being played in Madison, so very tough. It's one of the tougher environments to play in. Yeah, we'll have to take a look at that game coming up. I think Dill's a little bit higher on the Badgers than I was. I'm kind of a believer that your quarterback needs to be somebody who's consistent and can give you. I mean, teams only really go as far as their quarterbacks go. And when Wisconsin was good, they had like guys like Jake Cohen kind of just giving them consistent, steady play. Graham Mertz, he didn't do enough of that. Outside of those first 2 games, he was actually really bad. So
no, he had a brutal season.
So
again, my kind of thoughts are that's a talented player. I mean,
yeah, he's got to put together.
You could get more out of him. He was a true sophomore, first year starting in a season that was
crazy,
really difficult to make work, I think. So
yeah,
I also think running the ball was such a big problem that hurt him too, honestly.
Yeah, and I mean guys like Jack, is it Jack or Jake? I think it's Jack Cohen. Guys like Jack Cohen really excelled when they could kind of work off that John Taylor ground and pound. Yeah, I mean Wisconsin fans were spoiled so much with just a generational talent in John Taylor. So looking at that Big Ten West, I mean, it's just not a very strong side of that Big Ten. Northwestern, I don't think is going to be as good. I'm actually relatively low on Northwestern this year. I think Iowa's really their only legit threat for that Big Ten West title. And if they can take care of business against Iowa, I see them playing in a Big Ten championship game once again.
I agree. They've really ran that side of the table for probably about 10 years, it seems like. And yeah, again, with a weak Northwestern team coming back in my eyes too. And I mean, you'll be interested to see what Minnesota can do. It's like they took one step with PJ Fleck and then some massive steps back.
That was one of the most confusing. And I was talking with somebody on Twitter the other day about it. It's like, what happened there? I mean, they were such a promising team and they just stunk. And I didn't get why. And I'll say concerns about Northwestern is they're only returning 4 guys on each side of the ball. So 4 guys on offense, 4 guys on defense.
They don't load like that.
Yeah, they can't reload like an Alabama or like a Georgia. So I struggle to see them being they do get that Ryan Helsinki kid who transfers from South Carolina. I don't know if he's going to be.
He's bouncing. He's just bouncing everywhere. I don't believe in him anymore. It's like once you go from like, what is it now on his 3rd or 4th school, it's like now it's like, what is the problem? Everyone else, not maybe you.
What did Peyton Ramsey do? I mean, not to extend this game too much, but like, is Peyton Ramsey in the NFL or what? He did go to the combine. Yeah, so he was. I mean, I'm surprised someone like him left because he was good for Northwestern. Yeah, he was like what Northwestern needs, kind of a grinder quarterback, who's not afraid to tuck it down and get a first down on 3rd and 5, is an athletic but accurate thrower. So yeah, I guess to wrap up the Badgers episode, I think we both see them winning the Big Ten West. Dill maybe sees them going and doing a little bit more. I think they'll just win the Big Ten West. I think they'll struggle to beat teams like Penn State and Michigan. But if Graham Mertz puts it together, this team is very, very good around him with a very good defense.
See, just as an aside, I thought that -4, I think like that's a pretty nice line for Wisconsin at home against a Penn State team. I don't necessarily see where you see them getting so much better either. I mean, they lost guys in the draft and were horrible last year. So
yeah, but again,
I don't mind it.
That Penn State. Yeah, we're gonna have to feature that game for a week 1 slate.
Yeah, we will.
Dylan and I will hash it out. We'll get a little bit more film in. At least I will get a little bit more film in on Wisconsin. And we'll give you guys a winner for that game coming soon. But for now, thank you guys for tuning in. And we look forward to doing another one later this week. Peace.